It's the beginning of October on the Blockbusters show, and today we are talking about The Fog from 2005. One of the many, many, many pointless horror remakes from the 2000s.
I got something on my radar. It looks like a fog bank, and it's moving straight toward us.
What kind of fog moves against the wind?
Elizabeth? What's wrong?
I keep seeing horrible things happening. What the hell is that? Get out of there! Come on! Right ahead! There's something in the fog! Nick! Where are you? Nick!
Out of all the horror movies they could remake, they went with one that is one of John Carpenter's most underrated. Like, I mean, it has a cult following, obviously, but at the time, it just kind of blended into the background. But in the 2000s, I guess somebody was scavenging for old horror movies that they could just senselessly remake, and lo and behold, this is the one they landed on. The prosperous town of Antonio Bay is born in blood as the town's founders get their money by murdering a colony of lepers. But the truth of what they did is concealed from subsequent generations. More than 100 years later, Elizabeth Williams, whose family lives in Antonio Bay, returns just as a statue in tribute to the founders is about to be unveiled. When a mysterious fog rolls in, Elizabeth and her boyfriend soon discover it has vengeful supernatural powers. For the sake of this review, I'm just going to be talking about this movie specifically. I'm not going to be comparing it to the original. There's no contest. The original is a way better movie. It felt like John Carpenter's love letter to supernatural horror movies from the 50s, where it was a lot more about suspense and building tension and dread, with a simple story about a town that is turning 100 and a strange fog comes over the horizon, envelops the entire town, and it's either making people drop dead in very gruesome ways, or it's turning people into these zombie-like creatures and they start attacking others. And you follow a small ragtag team of people who eventually come together, or they know each other. It's a very simple film, but it was incredibly effective. This is probably one of the most pointless horror remakes I've ever seen, up there with other flops like House of Wax with Paris Hilton. And I know remakes are the go-to for people to complain about on the internet because the original already exists. Why do we need remakes? But I've seen remakes of movies where it's like, okay, I didn't mind that. Like the 2000s remake of Dawn of the Dead. It's not as good as the original, but that's a tough act to follow. In terms of dumb 2000s horror remakes, that was one of the better ones, in my opinion. Then you get something like this where it's like, okay, The Fog is a relatively obscure movie. I don't even think you can use the whole, oh, we're using it to try and, get brand recognition points. Like, you remake something like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. Those are movies that have franchise to them. This is one of those horror remakes where the MPAA just shredded the shit out of it and whittled it down to just PG-13 blandness. Just like in the original, we follow a bunch of different characters around and they all kind of interconnect, all kind of intertwine. But it's not really an anthology movie where, oh, everyone just happens to run across each other at some points. These characters are connected. In this case, we have Nick, who is a sailor, and he has a couple of friends that he goes sailing with, that he works with. There's his cousin, who obviously is one of the first ones to die, and his friend, who is nicknamed Spooner.
Damn, you sexy as hell when you're mad. That's incredible. Where you going anyway? We got decks to swap.
And Nick is in a relationship with a girl who comes and goes from the town. Her name is Elizabeth. One of the ways to introduce us to their relationship is he picks her up while she's hitchhiking at night, and they try to have this awkward little back and forth to show that they have chemistry together. So cute, they're acting like they don't know each other, and he says that he can drive her into town, but then he turns his car around the other way because she says that he's heading the wrong way.
All right? Wrong direction.
And they go into town, and we introduce some of the other characters that are in this town. We have this one woman who Nick is pretty friendly with. She's a radio DJ.
So get on down to the town hall and check out the monument to those 4 brave men, one of whom was my great-great-grandfather, Richard Wayne. Did I already mention that?
She also has a son, and that comes into play a little bit later. But the last thing I want to point out with this character for now is that her name is Stevie. Then there's the obligatory drunk priest who's in the town who everyone thinks is crazy, but you know, it turns out he has all the answers to what the hell's going on. And I love how they introduce him.
What the hell was that? Murders! For nothing but murders. Blood for blood.
Father Malone.
I just love how casual Nick is about this whole thing. It's like, oh, yeah, drunk priest, Father Malone, up to his old ways. You should have seen him 2 days ago. He was drunkenly yelling at a Wendy's drive-thru speaker box. Must be a Tuesday. There's a homeless guy who shows up every now and again, and there's a corrupt mayor, of course there is, and you know that he's going to end up getting his comeuppance soon enough. As for what gets the plot going, Spooner and Nick's cousin decide that they're going to take some chicks out on the ocean. Once the fog rolls in, the only person who survives is Spooner. And we find that out way later. But the cousin ends up dying, and the 2 party chicks, they end up getting it too. And one of my favorite things is when the fog starts to roll in, you start to get some creepy shit going on. Like they look out and they see what looks like the wreck of a pirate ship. And I couldn't help but think, oh my god, that is a terrifying thought. They're filming another Pirates of the Caribbean sequel. Oh no. The next day, Nick and Elizabeth go looking for these guys, and they find that the cousin is dead, and the 2 partying chicks are, you know, their dead bodies are in the boat's net. And Spooner's, I spent the last few hours hiding out in the freezer because apparently whatever killed these people couldn't get him in the freezer. So they take him back to shore, but because the others are dead and he's the only one still alive, the police still think that he's a potential suspect, and they try to figure out if maybe he did it. That's the other thing. This movie kinda, sorta, not really has this like whodunit vibe going on in the first half. It's like, oh, did Spooner kill them? And the entire time you're thinking, it's obviously not him. The movie's title is The Fog. Of course it's not him. Like, I get they were trying to, I guess, keep the characters, you know, out of the dark and have it like, oh, they have something to do. They're kind of trying to figure out what's going on here. But it's like, we know it's not him. Weird editing brought on by the forced PG-13 rating is when Nick and Elizabeth have a sex scene. It's PG-13. You're obviously not going to show any nudity with a rating like that. Why even bother with a sex scene? I don't know. For context, it's after they go driving through the town on their first night. You know, they're getting acquainted with each other. You know, her settling back into the town. Nick drops her off with her mother because her mother lives in the town. But she ends up going back to Nick because her mother's a nagging control freak. So Elizabeth goes to stay with Nick for the night, and they go into the shower together, and it's a PG-13, no nudity. I mean, it's okay if you don't want to have nudity in your horror movie, but it's like, it's this weird in-between where it's like, okay, we want it to be edgy enough for it to not be a PG movie, but we don't want it to be too edgy to where it's a rated R movie. The most amount of skin you're going to get in this sex scene is, you see her naked backside. That's it. If you're one of those horror fans who really like seeing, you know, graphic sex scenes, or if you're a gore hound who likes seeing all the graphic gore and violence, there's none of that shit in this movie. PG-13. A little bit later, she goes to the computer, and then the computer glitches out and shuts down. And this is the first of many instances in the movie where technology glitches out because, again, the fog, there's this weird spiritual thing that fucks with the technology.
All the lights just went out. Everything's dead.
And he steps outside for a little bit, and then he catches on fire, and he dies. Before all that, after Spooner is put into the hospital, the police are going down potential evidence that shows that he could have been the one that did it.
Found this on the seagrass. They figure it's a knife that killed Sean.
But that's my knife.
Then, a little bit later, as Elizabeth is leaving the hospital, the corpse of the cousin comes back to life, possessed by the fog, to let her know that something is coming. So, yeah, this is this movie's version of the zombies. Because they really don't do that many zombie-related things like in the original. I mean, there's sometimes they do it, like in this scene, but it's not really as big a deal like in the original. I mean, people do end up getting burned to a crisp and turned into these skeleton things. So halfway through the movie, Elizabeth goes to Father Drunkard and he explains what's going on. Basically, the town settlers killed some other settlers because they had leprosy. So now that settlement of lepers are now coming back as ghosts to get revenge on the town's 100th birthday, as the way for them to get revenge. The entire time I was just thinking, wow, this is reminding me of Uwe Boll's House of the Dead.
There is no God. There is only me. May he have mercy on your soul.
Shit, when you're reminding me of an Uwe Boll movie, that is not a good sign. As for the mayor, when people start dying left and right, he's one of the first to go. Along with Elizabeth's bitchy mother, she also ends up getting killed. Father Malone, the drunk priest guy, he also ends up dying just because they had to kill one of the main characters off, and I guess he was the one that had to go. The spirits in the fog start to come for Stevie and her son. And I love how they try to interconnect all the characters together. Stevie is at the radio station, and when she starts hearing about people dying left and right because of this fog, she gets on the radio and she's like, "Quick, someone help my son! My son is home alone, and you know he's gonna die because of the what's ever going on in this fog." And then it shows Nick listening to the radio in his truck, and then he speeds off to go save the little boy.
Anybody can hear me, please go check on my son. The phone lines are down. Please check on my son. There is something in the fog, please. I cannot reach him. He's at 887 White Beach.
His aunt is watching him, and you know she's this like older woman. She's just peacefully washing the dishes, and then like a zombie hand comes out of the sink and like touches her, and then she starts to dissipate, and then she like turns into a burned, charred up skeleton. Say this about that scene. That's the second time I've seen a laughably dumb death scene in a horror movie involving a sink. The first one is obviously Wish Upon. So after this little bit of brilliance, there's so much amazing about that scene. One, I love the fact that the kid actually thought that was a good way to keep the fog out by just putting regular ass Scotch tape at the bottom of the door. And more importantly, I love the fact that they had this like over dramatic shot of him pulling the tape out. It looked like something out of an Evil Dead movie or something. All that was missing was Ash Williams going, "Groovy." But anyway, just as it seems the fog is about to get the kid, Nick shows up and saves him. They get out of there. Elizabeth heads to the graveyard because that's where all the spirits are starting to show up. Again, another movie it reminded me of just a little bit was, because you have the spirits of people who are on ships, it kind of reminded me of Ghostbusters 2 when you had all the ghosts getting off the Titanic because it arrived at harbor. So Elizabeth gets to the graveyard, and it's here where she sees one of the ghosts is her grandpa, which they referenced earlier. And then she goes to her grandpa, and then they kiss, and then she turns into a ghost, and then all the ghosts just leave. Next day, everything goes back to normal. Stevie and her son are talking about what happened on the radio, and Nick just kind of has to live with the fact that his girlfriend is actually a ghost because her grandpa was actually her husband in a former life. And they even have this shot at the end where they show this old picture of her grandpa and her grandma, who it turns out was actually her. Yeah, that was really stupid. Just like the rest of the movie, that was really stupid. Aside from this being an utterly pointless horror remake, this just suffered from everything that was bad about really mid to crap level horror movies from the 2000s. I mean, forgettable characters, really stupid plot, and really stupid plot elements like the dumb twist ending. A PG-13 rating, which felt like it neutered what could have been a pretty interesting rated R movie, but they just didn't have the balls. They wanted to play it safe, and the movie just came out really bland on top of it. And just a lot of really laughably bad moments. I mean, there was stuff I forgot to mention earlier, but there's fog enveloping the truck, and he even says, "I can't see." So what does he do? He fucking speeds up, and they end up crashing.
It's too thick. I can't see through this.
What did you think was gonna happen, dumbass? I mean, I think it should go without saying, but this is a horror remake of a John Carpenter movie from the 80s, and one of the first things they do is play a Fall Out Boy song. So I think that perfectly sets the tone for what kind of movie this is. So October 2023 is not off to a good start on the Blockbuster show. However, we do have a good movie we're going to be talking about next time. It's based on a beloved Nickelodeon cartoon. It came out just a couple years ago on Netflix, and it gave a lot of fans of the original show a sense of closure. And of course, I am talking about Invader Zim, Enter the Florpus. We'll be talking about that next time on the Blockbuster Show, but until then, I'm Adam Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Spooner, the engine's dead.
Nobody care about that. You know why? Because we got Ben. And for two, we got Ben. And after that, Ben.